All right, guys, welcome back to another very, very short episode of the Babbles Nonsense podcast because number one, I procrastinated. I wasn't even going to do an episode this week because I have been swamped at work. When I say swamped, like sometimes I have some downtime to like do things that I need to get done throughout the day, whether that be read a book, just for a break, do some yoga in my office, whatever it is. And I have not had that time this week. But last week, after I did some updates, I totally, and I don't know how I let it slip my mind, forgot to say a few things. One being, and I can't believe I forgot this last week since it was the first episode in January. At the end of this month, I believe I started my podcast at the end of January in 2020. So I cannot believe this podcast has been ongoing for 6 years. There was one moment in time where I did take like a 6-month hiatus from the podcast because I was super burnt out at work. But I came back and you all still support it. So I just want to thank you so much for sticking around for the 6 years of listening to me babble literal nonsense. So yeah, thank you all. If you're new here and you haven't listened from the beginning, then yeah, you have several episodes to catch up on. I recommend doing that, I don't know, today, this week, since this is a very short episode. But one other thing I totally forgot to mention in my update of updates or holiday shenanigans was that my nephew came down to visit, obviously not last weekend, but the weekend before. I believe it was the weekend after New Year's. He came down to visit me. Him and his girlfriend came. And that was a fun experience. And I say that because my nephew obviously has came down to visit with his mom, my sister, or my mom, his grandmother, when he was a lot younger. But this was the first time that he had ever came to visit me. And he drove himself here. He's 21 now. So got to take him out for some drinks, which was very interesting. Felt very old. I'm like, how are you 21? But he's such a good kid. And I took him and his girlfriend to Topgolf because he's never been. They had a great time. And then I took them to the mall to shop and whatnot. And we went to my favorite place at the moment, Providence Bar. And when we walked in, because you have to remember, I'm from a very small town. We don't have like super nice restaurants. When we walked in, he immediately, I could tell on his face, he was like, what are you doing bringing me somewhere this fancy? And I was like, calm down, because we were all in jeans. And if you've never been to the Providence Bar, it's very swanky. There's low lighting. It looks like it would be like super duper fancy. In my opinion, it is like an in-between. It's like one of those, actually, I talked to like the manager and stuff there or some bartenders, and they were like, the way they wanted it to be was kind of like a neighborhood bar since it's in Providence, and they just wanted it to be like you could just walk in off the street and you could just come in, hang out, whether that be you're off work, you just got through running, whatever it is, all are welcome, right? So I tried to explain that to my nephew. I was like, look, I understand it, quote unquote, looks very fancy. And it is a nice restaurant. Don't get me wrong. It could be a very nice date night. You could come in dressed to the nines, or you could come in literal sweats. I was like, you can come in here in sweats. And literally when I said that, someone walked by in a tracksuit. I said, we are not out of place because we are in jeans. But again, he's just not used to eating at places like that. And I was like, look, they have burgers, they have quesadillas, they have wings, they have pizza. It's fine. So we eat, I have a drink. He does not, he's not a real big drinker anyways, but he was like, oh, this food is actually really good. And I was like, see, aren't you glad that you did not just turn around and walk out and just eat at a fast food restaurant that you're used to eating at? And he was like, yeah, it was good. I was like, see, you can come back and bring your girlfriend here on a date next time. But I was like, how did I forget to mention that my nephew got to come down and hang out, and I got to show him around Huntsville and show him like just where I like to hang out and whatnot. It's just very interesting, like when you hang out with your nieces and nephews, or I don't know, maybe you're a parent listening to this and your kids are older and you're just like, how are you already this old? Because that means I am also 21 years older since you were born. But anyways, that's all I really had to say this week. Like I said, I wasn't even going to like do even an episode. I know this is very short, but I had to put those caveats in there because I completely left them out last week. But yeah, I'm just taking a little R&R this weekend before this episode comes out because I just needed it, because again, work super stressful, super crazy busy. And I hope to have a new episode out to you guys next week. So stay tuned for that. And since this was a very short episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to some of the favorites and telling me which ones you like, or just DMing me, or there is actually a Q&A box. I think it's at the end of, like, in the show notes, where you can actually send a message. It doesn't necessarily tell me who it's coming from. So if you want me to know who it's coming from, definitely put your name in it. If you want to ask a question or anything like that, or you have a topic you suggest, any of those work. Anyways, guys, have a good rest of your week, and hopefully I'll be back next week with something new and exciting. Bye.